Hello and welcome to this making of tutorial for the ghost shot I did in Houdini. And I want to show you some tips and tricks on how I created this shot. All right, so here we are in Houdini and I'm working directly into the Solaris context because I want to use this asset later on as a USD asset. So when you're working in Solaris context, you're working in the USD space. All right, so this is the mesh of the twister. I imported it as an FBX file from 3ds Max. I modeled this in 3ds Max, not because I could not model this in Houdini, but the reason is that I'm way faster in modeling in 3ds Max than in Houdini. So the FBX comes in, I transformed it to match the size a bit more to my scene, and then I created a UV project node to just have some UV coordinates. So now this mesh comes in as one mesh, okay? And now what I have to do is, because I want to add different materials on different part of this mesh, I have to split up this mesh. And in Houdini, you can do this with this group node, okay? If you type in a group, you can see there are a bunch of group nodes, but this one that we use is this standard group node here, okay? So what you can do here is you can click on this arrow here and it gives you a rectangle selection, and you can select some polygons and then press enter, and then it will save the coordinates or the IDs of these points that you have selected into this base group. You can rename this group to tip. I did the same thing for the body selection here, right? Called wood in this case. And you can see here all the coordinates are stored in this group. After that, I used a blast node. You can see this is the blast, and I blast out the tip group. The same for the other side. I blasted out the wood part, so I have just only the tip. Now, very important, when you're working in Solaris, you have this name attribute nodes. So the attribute is name, and then you have to specify the type that you want to have, or the name of the part of the mesh. In this case is wood here and tip here. If I disable these two and I'm going back to the stage level, you can see that it's just one single mesh. To split up these meshes in the stage context, you can use this name attribute. So specify the attribute name, on which class you want to have it. You can have it in primitives and points and vertices, and then you just specify the part of your mesh. And when these two name nodes are active, and I'm going back to stage, you can see that now Solaris splitted up these two pieces, okay? So you can see that here is just the tip, and this is just the, okay? So I have two meshes, and now it's easier for me to apply different materials on different mesh parts. All right, so the next step is we go out of the sub create, and we create this component builder node tree. It's very simple. Just press tab and type in component builder. There we go. And Houdini creates automatically these 4 nodes for you. It creates a component geometry node. It creates a material node, this combination node where these two parts comes together, and then the output where you actually can save your USD asset. What I did here in the component geometry node, when I double click inside, here is my object merge. So it picks up the twister out from the subcontext, this twister out. So whenever I make some changes in the model here in this subcontext, it will be automatically updated here. Connection goes to the output default. And then I created a second path here to the poly reduce What this does is creating a reduced polymesh out of the existing. Okay, you can see here, this is reduced. I can reduce even more. It depends on what I want to have. So this is a good technique to have the proxy in the viewport and the high resolution mesh for rendering. So just use the poly reduce node here and put it into the output proxy. So what you see here in the viewport, I have the proxy model, and as soon as I start to render that out, you can see that I have the high resolution mesh. Then I created two materials because I want to render this out in Karma. If you double click inside, you can have these materials, and these are basically just Karma material builder, and then you can rename whatever you like. And here is the wood material. So you can see here the wood tree. It's a simple base material, just the color, the roughness, and the normal map. And this tree nodes allows me to shrink up and down the size of the texture. I did a quick Houdini tutorial for that. I will put a link to that tutorial in the description below. And the second material is just a standard metal material. And then everything comes together. On this node here, you can see that here are the material assignment. So I'll show you how you can assign materials. So when this is empty, you can click on this little plus here, and it comes in with this path fields, and then you can fill them up. Okay, so in this case, I want to have the tip and these tip materials, and then I have the wood and this wood material. Okay, so now I can see that now this is applied for the proxy. In the render, it's not applied. I have to specify this as well. So I make two more, and now I have here the render, the tip, metal, and then wood, wood. So now it should be applied in the render as well. So you can see that now these textures, these materials are applied to my mesh. All right, so when we have this set up correctly, we have this USD asset ready to save. But before I save it, I can use this node tree also to create a material Lookdev. So for that, I need a HDRI light. I select an HDRI texture right there. And now I can start the Karma XPU, and now I can work on the material. So in this case, going into the material, into the wood. And what I like to do here is in the color, I like to have a color correct node, and I like to bring down the saturation a bit and bring it the gamma down to make the wood a bit darker. Maybe can reduce a bit the contrast like this, and then just bring it down even more. So you can see what I do. I have an HRI with nice contrast and light and shadow contribution, and I can really dive into the material and work on that material. What I also can do is just bring in a little bit of glossiness in with the coat, okay? Something like that. And I can really dive into the material creation until I like it. So when I have that and I'm happy, I can wiggle this out, go here. This is my USD, stop the renderer, and save the disk. All right, so now we have saved this USD file of this asset. And to bring in USD files back in Houdini or in Solaris, you have different possibilities. One possibility is to using a reference node where you can load in the file pattern and then this twister USD. A second method, how you can bring in your USD asset into the scene, especially when you have more than one USD asset, is quite handy to use this node, and this is the Stage Manager. Okay, So in the stage manager, you can bring in more USD assets, okay? If you have a lot of USD assets, you can bring those in here, right there. And you can see that this asset is still here. The good thing in here is that you can hide and unhide. You can move the asset. You can organize your asset structure, and then you can position your asset where it should be in your scene. It's a very nice and handy tool where you can position your USD assets. So the next step is to build up the scene. So I create a sub create node and I call this floor. And dive inside. And here I create a grid and I change the size to 5 by 5 meters right there. Then I use a UV flatten node. So I just have some UV coordinates. And at the end, I just create a null right there and call this floor out. All right, that's it. That's all what I have to do. And then what I do is I select both. On the PC, press the Alt key and drag, and then it's creating automatically a merge. On the Mac, it's the corresponding key to the Alt key of the PC. Okay, so when I press the I to here, you can see that I have my twister and I have my ground. All right, so the next thing is I want to apply a texture or a material to the floor. So I need a material library. Bring this in. I already have a wood material node tree created, so I can use the same one. I go back to my component builder, into this material library, select the wood and copy it, bring it into the new and paste it, call this floor. And then I have to change the materials. Okay, so let's grab this color. Let's go into the hip file, texture, and then here I have my floor material. So the roughness, there we go. And then the normal map, texture, and then we have the normal map here. Okay, important, just a side note, important is that in the MTLX image node, set the signature to color, and for the roughness and metallicness and specular maps, just set it to float, and then normal maps set to vector 3. This is important to change the signature of those image nodes here. So when I have that, I can assign the material to the floor. So here is an autofill material. Just click on that. And it's recognized, okay, so you have a material warp floor and a material path floor. And then we have to assign to the geometry to which geometry you want to apply. And this is this floor mesh. And you can see that now we have this wood material applied. All right, let's create a camera and make some changes. First of all, the view, the focal length, I like to have a 120 millimeter lens, focal length, and I position the camera into my scene. And what I also do is in the base properties, I bring it down the exposure. And now it's time to start the XPU render. And now we already see that we have our scene and we have our material applied. And now you can see that the scene comes to life. The next thing I like to do is I create another light, an area light. So with this area light, I can specify where I want to point, specular, diffuse, and shadow. With this light selected, I can click on the light and I can point exactly on that point that I want to have this light. Okay, so now I can make this. Here you can see the shortcuts to change things. So what I like to do is I change the intensity of the light. And to make it more interesting, I select the camera, go to sampling, and turn on this f-stop. When it's 0, the blur is off. As soon as I start to bring in here a value, you can see that the blur starts working. Okay, but you can see that everything is out of focus now, except the HDRI. If you want to have the HDRI to be part of the depth of field, you have to make the following. You have to select the dome light, and in the karma setting, there is the setting render light geometry. Okay, turn that on, set and create, and turn it on. And now the HDRI is part of the depth of field. To set up the focus point, you can select the camera, go to this icon here, and then press Shift F twice, and you can see this line. And then with Shift click in the viewport, you can specify the focus point line. Press Shift F again, and then you can see that my twister is in focus and the rest is out of focus. So to organize your scene in Solaris, you can see that now I have floor, render, twister, camera, and lights, materials, floors, stuff like that. So to organize your structure here, it's very simple as well in Houdini. So in this case, I want to have the floor and the materials of the floor I want to have together. So in this case, I want to have the floor, and you can see here the input path prefix is $OS. So in this case, I type geo. Okay, so now it's creating a geo here, and here is the floor. All right, the same thing goes with the material for the floor. I want to have the material as a part of the floor. So I'm just going to create a geo here. Right there, it's bringing into the geo. And I want to have it into the floor as well. So I just type in here after this first. I go into type in floor / and then material. Bam. Okay, so now I have geo, I have the floor, material, and my mesh. So the same goes for this twister. I can just type in here geo as well in this primitive path. And now it's part of this geo. So you can see that now I have my geo here, I have my floor, I have my twister. Okay, the same thing goes with the light and the camera. I can click on the camera and I can change this to scene. Now it's creating a scene, and in the scene is my camera. The same thing goes for the light, scene, in before, and it's creating a scene, and here is the light. And if you click in here, you can see that I have my lights and I have my camera. And the same for the dome light. Just click on the dome light and just change here to scene as well. And now everything is organized. All right, and the last part is I show you how I animated this twister rotation and this wiggling. This is very cool. So on the reference node, after the reference node, I place in a transform node. And in the transform node, I do the following. So you can see here rotation. So when I rotate or I change this value, you can see that it's rotating. So we know that we want to manipulate this Y axis. So what I can do here in Houdini, you can click on this field and type in $F times 30. And you can see that it does not create any keyframe, but when I start the play button, you can see that it's rotating automatically for me. To see the value now, you can see that 7,200 rotations, $F. So every frame, it's creating a rotation of 30 degrees. So we can calculate that. So we have 240 frames. So 240 times 30 degrees. And we have 7,200. We click in here, 7,200. So now the wiggling. Okay, so the wiggling, you can check, is this axis here or that axis here? Also this wiggle, we can drive with an expression. So what I do is I lock this screen. So I have always this screen visible. I go in the X-axis, right click, and use the motion FX and scroll down and see here noise. This window pops up. Okay, so it's creating this noise and the amplitude is 10. So when I press play now, you can see that it spins and it's wiggling. And what I can do now is I can reduce the amplitude. So just so that I just have a little bit of wiggling. And that is great. Okay, so we can close this down. Back to stage. So now everything is set it up. If you want to see a preview of your animation, if the speeds are correct, if everything works good, you can create a flip book. So this icon here on the side is the flip book. So you can start the flip book here, press the start key, and then the flip book renders out the viewport render. It renders out all the frames quite fast, and then you can see if the speed of your animation is correct. Okay, so you can now play back live in real time. The last step that we have to do is we have to create a karma render rub. All right, so in the render karma settings, you have to specify the output format of your output in PNG, EXR, JPEG, or whatever, and then make sure that you are on the right camera. You have to specify your camera that you're using for this shot. So especially when you have multiple cameras and you render out your shot, it's and you have chosen the wrong camera here, the shot will be rendered with the wrong camera. So make sure that this camera that you use for your shot is specified here. The resolution, you can use defined resolutions. I choose a manual resolution, so I can change the resolution here and make sure that the engine setting here is set to XPU. Then, depending on what quality you're searching for, you need some testing to find out the best quality settings. Here I set it to 256 samples. I also used in the output filter tab, I used the Intel Odin denoiser. You can render it out without any denoising, and then it needs a bit more samples like that. And that's basically it. That's the render settings. And what you can do, you can click on the USD render up and you can render to disk or render to disk in background. When you click on render to disk in background, a new window will open where you actually can see a kind of a render queue, something like that. So that brings me to the end of this tutorial. I hope you liked it. If you have any questions and comments and feedbacks, please let me know in the comments if you like tutorials like that. I'm really appreciative of every comment that comes in if you like those content. And as always, check out our Discord server. The link is underneath in the description. There you have direct connection to me and to other great artists. So check out our Discord server. I thank you very much for your attention. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. See you next time in another tutorial very soon. And bye everybody.